Time now for our Spotlight program, and as I mentioned earlier today, Lee Dimmitt, Jefferson County Supervisor, steps in the studios. We have several things to talk about. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Let's jump right into it. If listeners were listening earlier this morning to KMCD News, and we hope that they were, they heard that there was quite a bit of discussion yesterday about the status of the projected Heartland Co-op expansion to Jefferson County, just on the city's east side. Maybe you can talk maybe a little bit about the shift in thinking when it comes to the co-op.
Okay. Obviously, when we initially projected this and sat down with Heartland, our hope was to be able to pave Nutmeg and Osage south of the bypass, as well as do some intersection work at Pleasant Plain and Salina, and also 185th and Pleasant Plain. That intersection work will still go on, and 185th is in construction for this. In fact, we'll do the bid letting in April, so we're going to redo 185th. Was never part of the Heartland Co-op project.
Now, again, that was from Highway 1 over to Pleasant Plain.
Yes, yes. In the process of leading up to establishing what the cost would be and how much TIF dollars there would be, which actually is property tax dollars that Heartland Co-op would pay, hinged upon several factors. One was obviously where the assessment would come in. The estimate is at about $15.5 million. But Adam and myself, Executive Director FIDA, and myself decided that we were not going to operate on that high level because, again, it was just an estimate. So we predicated everything off of $13 million. And then you have, with Governor Branstad's new commercial property tax relief, you're going to take 10% off the top of that. So we actually were working with a base figure of about $11.7 million. Then we asked French Reinecker to come in and give us an estimate of what it would cost to do Nutmeg. And it came in about $900,000 higher than what we had originally planned. Now, part of that is because they built in a buffer to allow for unseen circumstances, contingency fees, and that sort of thing. And so from a $1.9 million estimate, we grew to 2.8. It does not mean that it's actually going to cost that much, but we have to plan that way. So looking at what we would receive in property tax revenue from Heartland Co-op, we had to rethink the project somewhat as far as what we could actually do with their TIF dollars. Because obviously I don't want to throw the county under the bus. We want to make sure that we're able to generate enough revenue to pay the bond and to get as good an interest rate as we can get on that bond, because the further out you go on the TIF, the more expensive the interest rate gets. Now, it's usually on the back end where the interest rate is the highest. We could start out potentially with somewhere around 1.1, 1.2% interest. But you get to the back end, you could be over 4%. So we computed everything based on an average of about 3.4%. Now, I think that puts us in the ballpark pretty good. Supervisor Dick Reed has some concerns about the railroad underpass. And so we've kind of, yesterday on the agenda, there was to hire Jeff Heil as our financial advisor. Jeff has done a lot of work for Jefferson County, and he's very, very good. But we decided to table that for the time being until we receive some correspondence from the railroad. I don't anticipate that the railroad's going to do anything with the underpass, but Dick would like to at least see some correspondence from them in that regard, one way or the other.
I want to stop
Right.
there. From the beginning of this process, wasn't it sort of understood that the underpass at the railroad was sort of it was what it was, and nothing really could be done right now about it, and it was not in the foreseeable future that Burlington Northern was going to address that?
Yes, I agree with you 100%. But as is the case a lot of times, in moving forward, sometimes you not necessarily change your thinking, but things pop up in your mind. You have some concerns that you'd like to see, and I think maybe part of Dick's thought process was that if we had the railroad on record, or if we communicated with the railroad that it was our desire to see some change in regards to that underpass, that maybe it would not necessarily facilitate it at this point in time, but maybe sooner in the future than what was anticipated. We had Calhoun Burns do a precursory review of the bridge, to look the bridge over and stuff, to see where where they would rate it and that sort of thing, and we pass that information onto the railroad. In the process, or not in the process, excuse me, in the project on Nutmeg includes signal lights. And we also will be taking down some of the road, leveling out some of the roads so that the sight distance is better. But there will be a light system. It was always in the project, was always my desire to have a light system. Now, one of the things in talking to French Reinecker last week, myself, Adam, Scott Klein, our engineer, and Steve from French Reinecker, we discussed, I asked that the speeds be reduced. They initially were going to post it at 55, which I think is way too fast. It doesn't need to be, especially considering that when you're coming out of there, if you're headed north, you're going to, in a relatively short distance, you're going to come upon a stoplight anyway. And given the sight distance, the narrowness of the underpass, 55 was way too. So at the very most that I would see it posted at would be 45, and I think that's probably even too fast. But the intersections, what we're looking at doing, Scott Klein, our engineer, has applied for what's called STP funds, or Surface Transportation Project funds, to do Ash Avenue in Batavia. We have about $1.9 million of STP funds available to us through Area 15 Regional Planning Affiliate. It take quite a while to go into it, but suffice it to say that we receive federal dollars into Region 15, and those dollars are allocated to the different counties and cities within our region. And as long as those funds have not been encumbered, that is, borrowed upon by other entities. So we're looking at taking those funds and doing Ash Avenue, and then the farm to market money that we had earmarked for that over there, we can use to do the intersections on 185th and Pleasant Plain Road, and on Salina and Pleasant Plain Road. And so they won't be in the TIF project, which lowers the amount of bond that we would have to borrow. We're probably looking overall, with fees and other costs, if you will, besides the actual doing of the road, probably about a $3.1 million bond, in which Heartland Co-op's property taxes would be used to pay that bond. Nobody else's taxes would be captured in that regard, which is a very good thing, but it also limits our ability to a certain extent to be able to do things, and you don't want to go out any further than you absolutely have to. So the project itself had conversation yesterday. I'm sorry, I didn't. Adam had a conversation yesterday with Heartland Co-op. They are looking at a start date of June 2014 for construction, and I'm hoping that we can, facilitate that and move forward. But the board is acting cautiously, as well they should be. I'm excited about the project, but as I stated yesterday in the meeting, and in the meeting we had with French Reinecker last week, under no set of circumstances do I want to throw the county under the bus. We have to make sure that this project is financially sound in one way or another. One of the things that we have discussed with Heartland, doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but we have discussed with them, is what's called a minimal assessment guarantee, which would put the county in a very favorable position if we can negotiate that, which simply means that if the actual assessed value drops below what's necessary to make the bond payment, they would make up the difference. I do want to touch real quickly on something that was discussed at length yesterday. There's been talk about a rebate and an abatement, and those are two entirely different things. The county and the city of Fairfield have entered into, they do resolutions which allows companies that have new construction, whether it's an existing company or a new company, they can get a 3-year tax abatement. up to 3 years, and so they don't pay any taxes, any property taxes. If we were to do that for Heartland, it would end up costing us a whole lot more money than doing a rebate. And so we've never discussed the tax abatement with them. What we have discussed, though, is any excess above and beyond the requirement, the needed requirement to pay the bond, we would rebate back to them for a period of 10 years. If there was any excess. If there's no excess, they would get nothing. And that's an agreement that, that they have agreed to in principle at this point. So, and I'll just use a hypothetical. If our bond payment was $250,000 a year and we generated $252,000 in property tax, we would rebate back to them $2,000. If we generated $500,000 in property tax, obviously, it's not going to happen that big, but I'm just to put it in perspective. So there is no guarantee of any money returned to Heartland, but any money that we're talking about would strictly be property tax revenue that they paid, and it would not include the 10% rollback. In other words, the first, just say it was $15.5 million assessment, that first $1.5 million they would pay no property tax on. That's money in their pocket that they get to keep. So there is no incentive as far as we're not writing them a check to come and locate here, and we're not providing them any abatement on their taxes. They will pay taxes, and their taxes will go to pave that road and other infrastructure requirements on Nutmeg if the project moves forward.
Lee Demmett's our guest today. Lee's Jefferson County Supervisor and actually serving as sort of the liaison on the county level with the project, the proposed Heartland Co-op project on the city's east side in the county, not in the city. So, Lee, how would you characterize now the relationship between the county, FIDA, and Heartland? Is it still amicable and moving forward since there has been a few wrinkles put in, come across?
Oh, absolutely. Again, like I say, we spoke with Heartland yesterday, and they're still very much on board with the project, and they understand, being in the corporate world like they are, that you can encounter hiccups in anything, and the responsibility of elected officials, any elected officials, is to make sure that we don't see things with rose-colored glasses, and that we get so caught up in the shiny little baubles over here that we lose sight of potential problems on the other side. And so when we have the conversations, sometimes it appears that we're in disarray, and maybe to a certain extent we are, but the reality of it is that that's good, and that's part of the process. And I've often said that when I come to a meeting and I think I have an understanding of something till I hear the other two board members talking, and I think to myself, I really hadn't looked at it from that angle, or hadn't thought about that. And so I think that it's all good, and ultimately what Dick and Becky and I want to see happen, as well as Adam from FIDA, and for that matter Todd and Tom from Heartland, is the best possible scenario for Jefferson County and for Heartland Co-op, that we want to partner and make sure that we've got a solid relationship, and that we can help them grow, and in turn they can help Jefferson County grow, help our producers, and so on and so forth. So we still have a solid partnership. We obviously still have some negotiation to do. I have absolutely zero problem with having firm discussions with the board, trying to arrive at what ultimately will be best for Jefferson County. We bring the auditor into the conversation. We've brought the assessor into the conversation. And the reason for that is because each of those individuals and their offices have expertise that we as board members don't have, and we need to draw on that. And we need to do ultimately what is best for Jefferson County. In regards to whether Heartland locates here or not, we still have to do what's best for Jefferson County overall, and we need to make sure that we can pay the bills, and that we have a contract in place that with Heartland that allows us to do that. And anything short of that, obviously we can't support. As much as we would love to have Heartland here, and I believe they will locate here, we need to make sure that the taxpayers of Jefferson County are protected.
It's dotting the I's and crossing the T's when you get right down to it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Budget has been certified and sent away. Is that right?
Well, we did all of the requisite resolutions yesterday, and I just a real brief overview without getting into a huge amount of numbers. We actually lowered the levy overall for the for the unincorporated areas of Jefferson County. They will actually see a 1 cent reduction. There will be no increase in the unincorporated areas of Jefferson County at all. But the way that we structured the budget, it allowed us to move $200,000 more money into the road fund, ostensibly to help produce or help purchase equipment and stuff. And overall, for like in the residents of Fairfield and stuff, they'll see about a 26-cent reduction. So there's no increase in property tax levies this year. Now, I'm not going to say that there's no increase in property tax because your valuations could go up, but we did not overall raise any levies. We did raise general supplemental, but we lowered mental health by 46 cents overall, which offsets the 16-cent increase. And so that gives a 30-cent decrease for residents of Fairfield. And then also, you'll probably heard, Marion probably reported on about the $100,000 reduction, if you will, because of the pool indoor rec facility referendum. We were required to budget that $100,000 a year in the rural basic fund. So one of the things that we did yesterday as a means of that resolution was to take that out of the budget. So that will show us a 27-cent reduction, but that was just cleaning up or doing business because we increased it 27 cents to cover the 100,000. When the referendum failed, we reduced it back to 27 cents so that part of it was even. Overall, because we increased the rural basic by 29 cents to help cover some of that $200,000, the 30 cents on the other end will reduce it, so they'll see a 1 cent increase. We were able for the unincorporated areas to move $200,000 into the road fund with no increase in the levy for the rural basic, and some reduction for the city.
Again, Lee Dimmott's our guest today. Lee, we have about 4.5 minutes. I know last week you and the other supervisors went to Des Moines to meet with legislators. Can you give us a kind of a brief overview of what you talked about, some of the issues that were at hand?
Well, and first, I didn't make the trip because I'm going up next week, but Dick and Becky did go. They went to the county day at the Capitol and then did attend the Iowa State Association of Counties. The two major topics that were discussed was the mental health redesign, which is in such a disarray that I have some real concerns about the state coming in and trying to grab local property tax dollars, and that was a concern that Becky had when she spoke with the legislators up there, and it's a concern that some of the legislators have, and they are attempting to address that. It's what's referred to as the clawback, and since the state took over paying 100% of Medicaid eligible consumers, mental health consumers, they're finding that they may have bitten off more than they could chew, and they're trying to take back money from the county. So ultimately, we're getting back up to square one. Then they're not paying Medicaid. The other big topic of discussion was the 10-cent a gallon gas tax hike for infrastructure. Does not appear that it's going to happen this year, and as you're probably well aware of, the board voted to support that resolution. I did not because I don't want to see more funds injected into local municipalities, both city and counties, for infrastructure, but because I don't believe the 10-cent a gallon gas tax hike is the way to go. It's not tied to inflation. What I can buy today for 10 cents, I'm not going to be able to buy tomorrow for 10 cents, and most of us understand that when the price of gas goes up, the amount of gas that's purchased goes down, so I think it's a wash. We've got several legislators on both sides of the aisle. Kurt Hansen is one, Mark Chelgren is one, Senator Amy Sinclair from over Wayne County Way have proposed standing appropriations tied to inflation using existing funds with no tax increase. And I think that can be done, and I will use real quickly as an example. The first thing out of the gate at the legislative session this year was a 6% allowable growth bill or proposal for school districts. That translated to $250 million. And my point simply being made is they can appropriate 6% allowable growth to schools. That is, they can find $250 million without making one single tax increase. But they can't find $200 million to do infrastructure, which is what they estimate that the 10-cent a gallon gas tax hike would go. The thing that concerns me the most right now is the federal government is looking at withdrawing $460 million of federal funds to the state of Iowa alone. That would look like, if we had to recoup that through gas tax, that alone would be a 20-cent a gallon gas tax hike. So we need to take a serious look at how things are going to be done, and I just personally don't think the gas tax is the way to accomplish it. Again, it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year anyway. What happens and what it looks like, I don't know, but we definitely do need more revenue some way for our infrastructure issues.
What are the things that you'll address next week when you go to the Capitol?
Well, the Iowa State Association of County Boards of Supervisors, this will be a statewide supervisors meeting, and I'm sure the big thing on the agenda again is going to be, where do we get the funds for the infrastructure, and how are we going to deal with potential loss of revenue from the federal government? Those service transportation project funds I was talking about earlier that we have here, that's part of that $460 million that we received from the feds. Now, President Obama earlier this month proposed a $600 billion, I believe it was, infrastructure funds, so we'll see where that goes.
All right. Lee Demmett, Jefferson County Supervisor, has been our guest here on the Spotlight program, covered a lot of topics, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Again, Lee Demmett, our guest today here on the Spotlight program.